Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, robot, idiot, and a loin streamer. And today, welcome to the world of Bodymore. Probably gonna also look at a couple of different things because I have some examples of creative projects in different areas. I'm already getting ahead of myself. So today I wanted to share kind of what my creative process generally looks like to maybe help anybody out in trying to figure out how to go through their processes. Now, I'm not saying that my process is any sort of standards to go by. I just know that it works for me because I have just also finished my fifth book. I just pulled my fifth book out of revision to get it into editing. And yeah. It is not the fifth book that I have written. That is just the fifth book that has gotten to this level, which is actually Bodymore 3. Yes, I actually finished Bodymore 3's revision by the end of 2022, and it is now going to my first readers, probably by the time this video goes live, because I'm doing a line edit, and then I'm going to send it off to get some feedback, and then I'm going to do a bunch more line edits, but it needs some feedback, because I'm like, what am I looking at? But before we get into what my process looks like, and hopefully if there are any questions that you have while watching me work, or things that I don't answer by showing you the way that I do things, feel free to ask in the comments down below and I will try to help the best that I can. Like I said, this isn't any surefire way of doing anything, and it's not some standard in which to go by. All I can do is show you what process works for me, and maybe parts of it will help you figure out what will work for you. But before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do on this channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. Two ways to be featured. One is Lamai, the monthly writing prompt contest here on the channel, where I give you a prompt, you submit a story that fits the prompt, and then on the first Monday of the month, if there's enough time, we fit in a number of the submissions, and hopefully you're in it. Number two is if you're an indie author and you've got a book that is coming out or is already out, just submit your first chapter and your cover, and they'll be read here on the channel and linked to, so hopefully people that are intrigued by your story will go and consume the rest of them. This just helps to just make indie books more discoverable. And then number three, if you would like to check out any of my books, including the book we're going to be talking about today, they're available at all of your favorite retailers for books, so and the library upon request. The book that I'm going to be using as a main example today is going to be Bodymore 2, because that came out in October of 2022. So there are going to be spoilers because I'm going to be walking you through the entirety of how the story is set up and how I kind of go through what I think I want in a story versus what developed, with how Bodymore developed. I may or may not show information about Bodymore 3 because I have that on the computer right now to show off, but I will also possibly show how Boom happened, let's put that together. And then I'm going to go through the whole process of going from draft to revision to second revision, because Bodymore 2 and 3 both got 2 revisions, and then going into editing, and then how I describe those two things, because I've recognized in talking with other people that some people consider revision and editing the same thing, and I do not, because they are such different parts of the process for me. So that's what we're going to do today, and hopefully it will answer some questions on construction, especially if you're going through the revision or editing process yourself, or even the drafting process, and maybe this will help you feel a little more comfortable with whatever phase it is that you're in. Also, this definitely feels like the Bodymore vibes. I think Bodymore 3 has a lot more description and the graffiti. It leans so much more into the graffiti and setting up neighborhoods. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with Bodymore from Ralph's perspective and the experiences he had with Baltimore. So we're going to go through Bodymore 1 and 2 with how the plot structuring goes and how the development goes. So I'm going to be breaking down kind of what I do. And then if you want to see how what I'm talking about then translated to the end of things, then I would recommend checking out the books just to see how things laid out. But this is how I put stories together, and you're just going to see that process. I'm going to do Bodymore 1 and 2 because the process was different for the two of them, because Bodymore 1 happened so much easier than Bodymore 2, and Bodymore 2 I actually had to skip around in order to know what the frick I was doing. It was so much harder, and sometimes you just have to deal with things being harder, and that's also part of the game of just doubt and having to go through terror. Yeah. So. Okay. So, Bodymore 1. The first thing that you'll notice with my manuscripts is that you'll see these Act 1, 2, and 3 folders, and that's less formal writing and more about me breaking stories down into, like, biteable pieces. If I needed 4 acts or 5 acts, whatever, I would do that, but I only mark major shifts in the world of the character in order to make up for how to break my story down. So, like, in Boom Boom Boom, it starts out with Jan in Ukraine, and then the first major shift happens when he goes to America, and then the second major shift, which is the start of Act 3, happens when he escapes the feds. Now, are those actually the beginning of the act? I don't know, but I mark my own stories just for when there's a cosmic shift within the characters' universes. I know that my sci-fi one has 5. Freaking all of Act 2 is just Prison Planet, I swear. So there's no set rhyme or reason for those other than it just helps me to recognize, okay, now we're in this phase of the story, now we're in this phase of the story. And you can do whatever you want with them. I don't measure them. All of the chapters, they're going to be like mostly the same amount of chapters. Yeah. But they just do whatever it is that they need to do. The way that I start any story out is, one, I need to have the character impulse. I need to know who the main character is. I don't need to know who all the characters are, but I need to know who the main character is, where they're starting, and what they need. And so with Bodymore 1, this started out with Joey, who works as an auto mechanic, and also answers the phones, being given a job in Baltimore. She lives and works in Baltimore, and she has to go pick up a car for Lincoln Park. I later found out that that car was for her best friend. But so that chapter just exists with her getting to the park with the idea of, I need to get her to the car to take the car home. Then the next then there ended up being a body in the trunk, which inspired the next chapter, which was the cops at the auto shop. And they have to ask her questions, obviously, because there was a body, and the person that is missing, the person that the car belongs to that had the body in it, was her best friend, so they were going to ask about that. So at that moment in time, I'm evaluating what Joey wants at that specific time, what she needs, and what she needs to do to get the thing that she wants. So in the situation where she's talking to Badges, and she freaking hates Badges, and her best friend is missing, and she doesn't believe that the Badges are going to go find her best friend, she needs to get away from the Badges, like, do whatever she has to do to talk to get the Badges off her back, and then get out so she can go looking for her friend. So that became what Chapter 2's goal was. That's it. That's literally all that I knew before I started writing. Chapter 3 became, after she got away from the Badges, what does she do to go looking for her best friend? She goes to where she picked up his car at Lincoln Park. It's daylight, so she looks at that. Something weird happens, which escalates the weirdness that sort of introduces the weirdness that is going to be brought in later, with Lincoln Park being connected to the River Styx, and a place where the dead souls, escape from when they jump into the river. When she can't find her best friend, she goes to take a break, doing what it is that she does when she is stressed out and needs to think, which is smoking and skating. So she ends up at Fort Armistead, which is a specific place in Baltimore, and there she thinks she sees her best friend and chases him into the catacombs, or the remnants of Fort Armistead. Fort Armistead has this whole catacomb area of an old Air Force base. Well, Fort Armistead is an old Air Force base. And so she goes in there and just chases, and then it becomes sort of like an Alice in Wonderland topsy-turvy thing, where she then slips and she falls through the ground, and that's how she ends up in Mordom. So that becomes the first switch at the end of Act 1, because now she has found the ghost town. So all that I knew when I started this book is the beginning, where she was starting at the car to pick up the car, and then the first major shift I needed was for her to find the ghost town. That's really all that I knew. Then between Act 2 and Act 3, I knew that I needed her to get out of the ghost town. And I knew that I wanted her to die. Spoiler alert, she dies. And that was going to be the second major shift, because she is going from life to death. Death, obviously, it's going to change the storyline. And so that becomes the end of Act 2 when she dies, and Act 3 starts with her being dead. Obviously, you can see that I fell off in actually writing any of this out, and I used this more to try to pick things out because I don't really plot very much. So what really happens, let's go into Draft 1, is I figure out what I want. Oh, there's in revision. I put revision notes in there, and I just start writing whatever it is. I get to the next chapter, I just start writing whatever it is. Act 1 I had basically pulled out in that story structure section, so I got through all of these by just writing what I needed it to be. Have her be attacked by a thing and chasing her. Okay, so this was a first draft note. Have her be attacked by a thing while she was going into the catacombs. And then have her hit it with her skateboard and then run, losing her skateboard. That was in the catacombs. This is her waking up. Soul looks like whoever the dead want to see most. When she greets Joey, Joey says, Mom, and then Soul is like, I'm who you want me to be most. Joey rolls her eyes. You might want to get that feature fixed. Yeah, so an organ's playing, so that just sets her up waking up in mortem. Revision 2. So one of the things that happens is I don't go back and edit when I'm doing a first draft. It's when I'm drafting and I think of something that I want to change later. I just come in and I leave this note at the top of the file or of the chapter that I want to edit. So then when I'm doing a revision, I have that note to add in later. Let's see if Act 2 looks any different with what these top things are. This is still the first draft, mind you. Okay, so she gets back, and once she gets back from mortem, she comes out of the catacombs, and she had seen a couple at the catacombs before she went in them. And once she comes back, that couple is dead outside of the catacombs. So obviously she's gonna have to talk to the police because she has to report a couple of bodies. So here we have her in an interrogation room, and then she's sent out. We're getting a relationship with Rocky. Here I know, okay, this note was for me to remember what I wanted to do. So that way, if I know where I'm plotting ahead, I don't necessarily know what comes next, but I might get an inkling of an idea of what comes next. So I'll put a little note on it. I'll show you more of what that looks like with Boom Shakalaka, because since Boom Shakalaka isn't developed even as a first draft yet, you can see more what the process looks like before the book is written. But this is basically, I'll put a note at the top of what I think that chapter is going to need to be, so then by the time I finish chapter 7, I know what chapter 8 needs to do, and sometimes this will just be 1 chapter ahead, sometimes this will be 3 chapters ahead. Again, I'll show you with Boom Shakalaka Boom, but I'll leave a note up at the top here for where I think the story is going to go next, which is why this story structure thing, kind of useless after I get started. Oh, what did I say that this chapter was? Return home, also ask the library for a quick education on... Yeah, she actually just Googles that. Get some emergency vehicles at the neighbor's house. That's when her dad attacks her, and then she jumps out the window and she runs to Jag's house. So she continues with her goal of searching for Wayland by going to Wayland's house and then sending herself an email from his computer, despite how stupid that is, despite Jag being like, don't do that, it's gonna bite you in the ass. Yeah, she gets arrested for that, and then she gets rearrested in book 3 for what she does in book 1 here. So, Joey doesn't really think on the long term, unfortunately. Make chain sounds whenever a dead is present and the Reaper is coming to collect. So that was just a note to add in for the revision. Baltimore always looks different at night. What is she doing? Can't say. Oh, that's when she gets a message from Wayland asking her to come to the freaking park. So she goes to meet him, and then she gets attacked by a banger. And then Wayland... Was it Wayland? Wayland kills the banger. And then he runs off because Karen is coming to get the soul of that dead person, and Wayland can't be around or else Karen will also consume him. So Wayland has to run off, and then Joey calls Jag and asks to be picked up because she doesn't have a car. And so then he comes to pick her up, and he's like, you need to tell me what's going on. So then they go for a drink, and she tells him what's going on, and then she gets attacked by the guy that she saw jump in the river Styx back in Act 1, because I think it was in... The music is playing, it's softer rock. Yeah, and here's where she first, in chapter 6, is where she first meets Karen and Val. And they've come to the bar to take somebody across the river Styx, whose turn it is, and they're like, wait, you're not dead. You're not supposed to be here, Joey. So then they're taking her to the exit while this other guy is being taken to Judgment. The guy rejects Judgment, jumps into the river, and then disappears. And Joey doesn't know what that means, and the Reaper tells her that it is, if you jump into the river Styx, you drown on regret. And that's where Guy comes in to here, because the ghost guy that attacks her is the one that jumped into the river Styx and remembers her, and that's the last thing that he saw before. She is the last thing that he saw before he drowned on regret, so now he thinks that she has something to do with all of the pain that he feels from rejecting Judgment. So now there's a target on her back by this rando that blames her for every terrible thing that's happening in his life. Anyway, so she gets attacked. And then she goes home, and the badges show up at her house because of that email that she sent, and they take her in. And they have a warrant, so she has to go in and answer questions. And because they just leave her in an interrogation room for a while, she says that she needs to pee. And when they take her to the bathroom so that she can, you know, do her thing, she jumps out the window, and then she gets murdered by this guy that is now stalking her. And that becomes the end of Act 2. So now this is when I figured, sort of, I'm trying to remember what the process was for this, where I figured she had to jump into the river Styx. Because she was not ready to die. She didn't think that she was going to die. Like, why would you? But she wasn't ready to die, so she ends up here, and she's kind of muted because she's an actual spirit. And I knew that she needed to get back to the other side because she hadn't found Wayland yet. So she was never going to be able to move on. So the next major thing that I needed her to do was to get out of Mordom. And this eventually turns into her jumping into the river Styx and getting to the other side. And now she is personally affected by the effects of the river Styx, which is now she wants to go and take care of her father. And the river Styx just makes you fully engaged in your enragement, if that is what you have. Whatever it is that you think took away your life, took away your choices, whatever you are obsessed with. And that was her father that held her back. So she needed to go and destroy her father. She goes home, destroys her father, gets a phone call message from her boss that fires her, and then she's like, holy shit, I need to go and kill that guy, because she has no control over her impulses. That's just what happens as a ghost. So then she goes to work, and Jag stops her from being a complete idiot. And then he's asking her questions, and then she has to meet up with Wayland because he messages her that he is there, and Jag is obviously not going to let her go and meet Wayland alone when she's looking like she's cracked out of her mind. And so then they get together and explain what's going on, and Jag obviously doesn't believe it, and Joey still has to deal with some things, so they leave. After, I think they pick a fight with another banger, and I think she thinks she sees the big guy, or she does see the big guy and smashes his head in. And they end up running out of a bar after causing chaos and running into Karen and Val, and Joey does whatever she can do to not move on because she's not ready to move on. So she makes a deal with him to go and collect her father's soul because she now knows that her father is not actually dead after she shot him in the head because he's a ghost. His soul has to be collected by the Reaper since he is a ghost. So she returns to her father, and see how all of this just connects with what she actually needs to have done? So that's how, and this might sound like complete chaos, but it is, everything that I do is driven by what the character needs at the moment and what stands in their way. So then that's how you get to the end, where she deals with her father and then calls Karen, and then Karen takes it away, and then that is the end of Bodymore. And so then after I have that draft where I've got the story together, and I know that by the time I reach the end of the first draft, I am just freaking done. My revision is usually longer. So once I have that full, this is the story as it goes, I move that on over into done, and then I start a new draft. In which case, with a new draft, I open a new file, and I have this side by side, where I have old version 1 on one side, and then new version on the other side, and I literally retype everything, changing phrases, changing scenes, changing entire things that I have to change, and adding to the setting, adding to the character, adding to the internal monologue. This is where the mood and the personality really get injected, because the first draft is really just finding the way through the path and what my character needs. The second is really bringing out the character, bringing out the voice, and bringing out the setting. And then making any of these corrections that I gave for myself, like add Glimmer that could be Wayland hiding out, because now I know that Wayland was in the forest, that was his car, and I know about these relationships because they developed through writing the first draft. And now I have to put those notes in there, or those clues in there that show who these people are to one another. Or with the river Styx, I had to build that out more in the second version. So then once I'm comfortable and happy with the revision, I go through, write the whole thing. Usually I add 20 to 30,000 words, at least so far. I should say, I add like 30% probably during revision period. 30 to 40%. Yeah. And then once I'm happy with the revision and I think that the story is mostly correct and the setting is mostly correct and I'm not doing any major changes, and revision is specifically for major changes because I work better in just retyping scenes out and not having to push stuff around. if I'm working on major scene changes. Once I'm sure that I'm done with those, I export and put it in a Word document, and then I use Microsoft Word reading to me to do line edits, to look for repeating sentences, to look for awkward sentence structure, to look for typos or missing letters that change the words. And I do multiple versions of going through a document that has a reader on it. And I have different reasons for going through a document. So like one of the one of the passes for Bodymore, both 1 and 2, was removing swear words because in some cases there were too many. I think right now I just exported Bodymore 3 and there are like over 200 uses of the word fuck. And I'm like, I should probably see if that is extraneous and I can pull back some of that because it probably doesn't need to have that many. But we'll see, because if it totally changes the way that a sentence is or an emotion of a character, then I'm not going to pull it out. But do I need to have that many? No. But so I look for things like that. Does Joey mess with her lip ring too much? Am I using she's breathing too much? Am I using her heart's pounding too much? Did I use the same sentence somewhere? Because sometimes during revisions, since you're going through the whole book over a period of a month or 3 months, you might forget that you moved something from one place to another. Whereas when I'm doing edits, I try to go through the whole manuscript within 3 days so that I can see exactly how I have things laid out and really focus on the emotional build-up to make sure that I follow the same emotional drive and then make changes that I need to. Because by condensing the time it takes me to read it, I get to see a fuller picture as opposed to when it's fully spread out. So this book only had one revision because it came out fairly well. Let's go to one that was less good the first time around to show you that sometimes you just have to let things suck to get through to see what you're doing. So looking at this, we got similar setup to the first book where I have some idea of what I was doing for Act 1, where it was Joey's house with a Jag, ending the big guy, getting away from gang, back at Jag's place, visiting Wayland because shit's going down / being hunted. This changed so much from what the conception of it actually was. Oh no. Okay. So the funniest thing here at Joey's house, you'll see more. That's right. You'll see more, I think, in this book with me saying what was happening in the chapter. At Joey's house, following the ending of book 1, Jag eats a beer discussing what happened. Jag is like, it smells like someone died in here, and Joey's like, because someone did, then his corpse rotted in that chair for 15 fucking years. Yeah, that's actually in there. Also, Jag says, you sound fucking insane. That's the first line of this book. And if you don't stay down, I'm going to beat your ass to next Sunday. I don't remember if he's as lame to say next Sunday, but he does threaten Wayland. So book 2 picks up right where, shortly thereafter, where book 1 ends of Bodymore. Remove the I love you from this chapter. I think I had Joey tell Wayland I love you, but that needed to be an emotional high point in book 2. So as I worked through the book, I realized I needed her to not say that because she has such a hard time telling people that she cares about them because she's afraid of losing them. And so that's something that she has to work through because of her trauma. So I couldn't just have that happen in this chapter, even though it happened in the first time. So the funny thing with Bodymore 2 is, I think was it chapter 2? Was it chapter 2 or chapter 3? Wayland, go find a guy. Joey and Wayland send big guy back to Karen. Oh, see, I had them already. God, I hate this place. Okay, so in this version, they might change to Lincoln Park. Yeah, in this version, Joey meets Wayland in first draft. Joey meets Wayland at Port Armistead, and then they're gonna plan to go after the big guy. When I did revision, that was incorrect, and I actually had to switch it so that Joey met Wayland at the park. Because at the end of this chapter, at the end of chapter 1, Wayland goes off on his own, and his regret actually ends up having him murder somebody. And so in the morning after, with Joey alone in the house, she gets a text message from Wayland saying that he needs her, and then she goes to the park and she helps him dispose of a body, which then leads into the next thing where she's like, he's obviously in need, he's obviously breaking down, and where is she gonna take him? Obviously, she's not very smart. She's gonna take him back to Jag's place because she has nowhere else to take him, and she needs to change his clothes, and she needs to help her best friend. So she gives him new clothes, she gives him a shower, And then she's like, let's go to a bar because we need to do something to get you to relax. And so then that becomes the bar fight where they get beat up by a bunch of ghosts to lose their shit. And this is where they run into Ralph, who becomes one of the big points in book 2 that sort of set in line what the goal of book 2 is, which is to help Wayland through magical means, i.e. fetishes. But in round 1, chapter 2 was such a freaking mess. And then, oh my gosh, and then D 1.5. I did this chapter twice in chapter, oh my gosh. The lines were so cringe, by the way. There were so many cringe things that Joey and Wayland needed to not say to one another, but I just had to get through the scene. You would just have to read and compare exactly what these drafts look like. But I remember calling chapter 3 my nemesis for a little while last year because it was so hard to get through to rewrite it. But it turned out so much better than it used to be. So we move on through that. And then there was a second chapter later. No, so this mostly went the rest of the way that it needed to go. That it is mostly the same. Wake up in the bar, that's the same. Joey spends the night at Wayland's house, so yeah, and then his house catches on fire and they get attacked, that's the same. Then Joey possibly switched this after Wayland's house burns down. Oh yeah, I rearranged a couple of chapters too. We did break a chapter into 2 chapters between revision 1 and revision 2. But we did move some chapters around. I remember that. On this side, what does chapter 7 say in Act 2? Joey goes back to Bates. So that starts basically the item quest that needs to happen. So she starts to figure out what she needs to go to Fort Armistead with the Jag, drop into Mortem. Let's open draft 2 up here because I want to see Fort Armistead. So we're pretty clear there. What's 9? Into Cadus Silvish, drops a damaged phone somehow. That's not your dad, Jay. Head's throbbing, my head's throbbing, so that's still the same one. We're probably gonna be fine on this until we hit nothing left from Jag or Soul or Old Town Mall, even the kind. So then we switch those. As you can already see, there's a difference in just the way that it's written. Into Cadus Silvish, drops damaged phone somehow, runs into Wayland's memories. This is just more notes. Add Wayland going, but Joe, what happened to your face? You like it? It was a birthday gift? Oh. Ooh, that's the flashback. Okay. Because she's tripping through the trees, and so she has a flashback. And I think... Oh yeah, this one's twice as long, because this holds both of the chapters. Or, because this holds both. This is twice as long as version 2, because version 2 split this chapter into 2 chapters. Because then this becomes Jag's side of the story. Or Jag's memory, I should say. That changed his and her life. So you can have the comparison of Joey's previous life and then her current life of her best friend. So then we end up back home. Jag's house was broken into while they were in Mortem. I'm pretty sure phone... Yep. I'm just trying to find where the second major thing was. Fuck, he tries to get out of work. Donnie is like, fuck no. Ride the car. When I wake up, I'm cold. Surprised nothing happened to it. Busted out windows, dents in the doors. Oh, I need to go back. I need to go another one, because that's another chapter that got split into 2 because it was so long. I guess it wasn't that long, but I did find a place in that for it to switch. So then we're on 14. We need... Oh yeah, that was a major thing that changed too. So in version 1, I think Donnie was like, you can't come back to work. There was this whole conversation where Joey was asking Donnie if she could come back to work, and he was like, no. And then he apologized because you don't leave your family out to dry, but then I think he was like, you need to stay home. I don't remember. I changed the context of what it was Donnie said in order to allow her to come back to work at some point, because she comes back to work in book 3. So Donnie's stance on whether or not she can come back actually light. It's going to be down here in the climax where things really changed. So most of these are going to be the same. And you got these little asterisks because that was me keeping track of what I was writing. So chapter 17, I pretty much skipped writing in the first draft, and then chapter 18, I also skipped writing in the first draft because I had to change those earlier chapters to deal with Wayland, because Wayland became the antagonist of the second book, and I had to set that up correctly in order to know where the climax was going to go. So as you can see, I mostly skipped those, or by mostly, I mean entirely skipped those. There's not even 2,000 words between all three of those chapters because I couldn't do anything with them. And I knew that I had, once I set stuff up in a revision, I would know what to do with those. And then I did know how I wanted the last chapter to end, which was Joey getting the necklace that she would then take to Jag because Wayland was gone. But that's how I knew that I needed to change things in order to set up Wayland to create then this final chapter. And then you see in revision here, let's see, our first missed opportunity. That's why those have stars on them, because I just skipped them entirely. So 17, old 15, 16. What the frick is that? My dad's gun. Yeah, so this ended up with 2.6 thousand words, highlighting stuff for me to return to and double check to be like, do I really want that in here? I combined two different chapters here because I didn't need 17 and 18, or 18 and 19. They accomplished as much as I needed them to. And so then after I've done that, since there was so much moving stuff around and so much rewriting, and obviously I was writing the climactic chapters for the first time in that first revision, since I skipped them in the first draft, then I had to do another revision that was rewriting everything from the bottom up in order to strengthen it. And yes, it does take a while. Let's go into my writing stats here. Let's see. I was in this mode from August 2021 to September, October, November, December, January. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think that's as long as Bodymore 3 has been in the same situation, because I just exported Bodymore 3 to start getting into the real business. So there's that. And then once I'm done, once I'm satisfied with how I think the story is majority done, because I'm not going to focus on line edits, I'm not going to focus on getting rid of repeated lines or focus on bringing up the vibe all that much until I'm exported and I'm just focusing on line edits. So this is where the huge difference for me is between revision and line edits. Revision is changes of story, changes of character, moving things around, writing things from the bottom up, because that uses a different part of my brain than paying attention just to the words and sharpening words and sharpening dialogue and sharpening text and description and making sure things don't repeat. So then once I'm sure that I am happy, so I don't have Plead. I forgot to move Plead more onto my thing so I could get it on this computer. So we're gonna look at Grieve more as my setup. So then once I'm done and I'm ready to just do line edits, I format the book to be appropriate for the format that it's going to be an eventual paperback, because I just like looking at it in Word better like this. And then I usually export as a PDF so that I can use the natural voice reader and listen to it, but I am just going to run a basic editor, run basic Grammarly to catch what I need to catch, and then it's time to just...
Yeah, no, some shit happened yesterday. No, nothing to do with the badges.
Then it's time to just
Personal
listen.
Stuff. Give me 30, yeah? Thanks.
Are we 0?
Jack's voice is soft, muffled by the wall, coming into the bedroom through it and the cracked door. The air smells like fresh coffee, paint, cigarettes, and him. My fingers...
And it's not always correct. If something sound like the inflections are terrible, and all I'm really looking for is anything that really catches my eye in repetition, and then I'll stop. But if something sounds really terrible because of inflection, I'll pause and I'll say it out loud myself to be like, is that really what I meant, how I meant to say it? Yes, that is. And then I'll keep moving. Or if I go, no, that's not what I meant, then I won't do that. And I will do multiple passes of the full book in this format to focus on different things and also to try to catch different things. So like I said, I'm going to do one that's focusing on specifically her physical reactions to make sure I'm not repeating physical reactions too much. And I already think I have to do that again because I'm not paying as much attention as I should. And some of them for how much swearing, and I know that there are a couple of areas later on in the story that I need to clarify some of the internal monologuing and the speeches, her reasoning, because my ideas in Bodymore 3 have kind of shifted from where I thought they were going to be during revision, but I'm not worried about line edits until I'm exported in this situation. And it is so important to me to run through the story multiple times to try to capture the vibe and the voice and the meaning behind what the character is trying to say. And I can't do that while I'm revising major chunks. I have to be able to focus on little minute things and break these details up. And usually when I'm doing this, I can do it within 2 to 3 days, get through the whole thing within 2 to 3 days, go through it again, go through it again, go through it again. And after I've gone through it a couple of times, that's when I usually send it to my first readers to start spotting things that I'm missing, to help me cut down on speeches that are not necessary, that I've gotten used to being in there, to find where the cumbersome stuff is, or to find where stuff that doesn't need to be in there, or maybe leftovers from previous versions that I've missed are still in there. And pretty much everything else that my beta and critical first partners read and find stuff in. Then once that's done, I make more edits, I let it sit, and then I come back after a couple of months and I go through it again with another line edit, because now I've got some time between. Look, at some point once you listen to it like 20 times in 2 weeks, you're like, I need a break. So I go and work on something else and come back. And that is how I take a story from ground zero all the way through the end. This is how I've completed four books, because Dead End Drive was a little different since that was my first novel. But this is how I do that. Now I'm going to show you very briefly what my actual undeveloped first draft outline style looks like. I have gotten about 12,000 words into Boom Shakalaka, which is going to be my next project. But so this is when we got story arc. In one inciting incident, Jan gets to America, meets Blake's family, climax, set off EMP, that should be EMP, electromagnetic pulse. 2, inciting incident, feds show up at the house, they start their trip to DC, so that's getting them, worlds swapped, obviously. Climax, reunited with team. Oh, because they split from, Blake's dad, and I'm thinking that Alex is gonna show up, and then ScarJo and Jan go one way, and Alex and Blake go another way, and then they reunite. And then obviously I don't know what's going to be in Act 3 because I need to know what happens in Act 2, or this middle section, to know what's going to happen. The community tab. So in book 1, Boom has a section that is basically a YouTube video, and as a prologue. And so in this, it's going to have basically a section that looks like a YouTube community tab with some of his talking about going to America. So this is more what my notes typically look like when I'm starting a story and I have not developed it yet. And this is what I know I want to be in the book, or in the chapter, and I'll add to that while I'm writing to make sure I don't forget the ideas that I still need to write into the story. And then as I go, I will come back and here's my revision note. Maybe put Jan in a Hawaiian shirt and have Michael opine on it. He heard vacation issue and wouldn't take it off. Also, I gotta remember to put Jan's ear buzzing in his Jan, because he's got tinnitus. Here you got the skip between these two sections because I haven't fully connected these to come back up here. This is just what I know I want to accomplish with the chapter, and that's all that I know that I need to accomplish. Get to Blake's neighborhood, American flags everywhere, really fit men in tight shirts, big trucks, all ex-military, show off gun collection, try to spook Jan, give him a gun, and then the two head off to the national park. Blake has a Jeep Wrangler, which is funny, she has a Tesla in DC. And then they travel out, boom, phones are off. So that becomes what the inciting incident is there. Here's 3 traveling out. Oh no, Raid Shadow Legends meme sponsor reference. There we go. So the boom doesn't happen in this chapter anymore, but that note is still there. This is when they actually get to the national park and shoot their YouTube video that sets off the EMP. This is them getting out of the national park, getting back to the car, finding that it's dead, talking to the dudes at the ranger station, and getting out. Everybody knows Michael. This is them getting back to Blake's house. So that's all that I know, is this is basically what I want. And then I have a vibe. You'll see these other notes down here, just conversation pieces that I have the ideas for that I haven't written into the story. And by the time that I get to writing that story, I'll figure out whether or not they fit in there. That's what my creative process looks like. And this is just taking you back to what a project looks like when I'm actively developing the first draft. And if you want to know what my workload looks like when I'm doing drafting versus revision, when I'm drafting, I try to give myself a minimum requirement of 1,000 words per day that there are in the month, and those 1,000 words don't have to get done every day. So like this month, there are 31 days. I need to have a minimum of 31,000 words drafted for whatever new project I'm drafting, or at least try to attempt that. I haven't moved on to drafting since I'm working on Bodymore's line edits, so I don't have that requirement. The line edits I require myself to get through the book within 2 to 3 days, and then start it over so that I can get through it and pass it on to my readers and then move on to Boom Shakalaka. But so that's how that works. And then and that's the bottom rung of my decisions. I have the 1,000 minimum, the 1,667 mid, and then the 2,000 as the gold tier, because I give myself multiple tiers to see which level of speed I want to go through for getting through the draft. And that way I know that it's going to take me like 1 to 3 months for a first draft, depending on how much I focus, and then I get into revision and I double my requirements. Because the words are already mostly there. The path is there. I just have to rewrite them. And some chapters are harder than others. And some days I'll end up doing 7,000 words. And other days I'll end up barely hitting 1,000 because I'm struggling. But that's just how it goes. And that's how I make it happen. And if I don't have a word minimum, like the minimum max for a day by the time I hit the end of the book, like if I get to the end of Bodymore and I'm in the last chapter and I only have 700 words that day before I'm at the end of the chapter, that's fine. Because the word count isn't actually important overall. It's just a way for me to logistically follow, to look like I am, for my brain to understand that I am actually, doing work. So I just keep logistical count of what I'm doing in order to keep motivated and understand that I am moving forward, even though it's taking me months or longer to get where I need or want to be. And that is how I complete my workload and how I make sure that my books are done. So far, so good. And it didn't actually start out with me doing this. A couple of years ago, I thought that I was going to do a first draft, set that aside, then do another first draft, and then circle back to that other first draft. And that's how I ended up with Cain and Abel is sitting around, Creatures Lie Here is sitting around, and Dust and Demons is sitting around. All in first draft-ish. Creatures Lie Here has a couple different drafts, but because I never really cycled through them, because I was cycling through them, I realized I was never getting stuff done, and I was falling out of character voices, when really, after the first draft, I'm much more able to hit that character voice and that universe so much harder because I'm getting into the mindset of that universe. So what works for me is just to jump right back into it to do the revision, hit that voice harder, and just keep cycling it and cycling it and cycling it until I get it to a point I can hand it to somebody else, get their feedback, and then I can work on something else and let my mind sort of separate from that world. But if I tried to switch and then switch back, didn't work for me. So that's my methodology. If there's anything that I can tell you about my methodology that I didn't answer here, feel free to ask me in the comments down below. I hope this was helpful in just seeing how somebody else might put a story together or work through a story, and maybe it'll help you work through yours or come up with different ways to deal with your struggle. That said, thank you so much for watching. Have a great weekend and don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out?
The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross. Is he in trouble? We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him.
Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Why? Did you do that? To the left. Plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead. Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?